Hello, my name is Ryan June, and we're going to read Wings of Fire, The Lost Tear, the New York Times bestselling series, Chapter 10. Tell? Don't tell? Mother needs to know who is this. But what if she thinks we killed her? Kazumi didn't know what to do. It was too strange a coincidence. Kestra turning up dead a few islands away at the same time as the dragoness arriving at the Serpent Palace. If Kazumi admitted she knew her, wouldn't her mother first thought be that dragoness had killed her themselves? After the way her friends had been looking at her lately, Kazumi didn't want to risk getting a similar reaction from her mother. What kind of dragon are you really? And can you be trusted? And who else might you attack, Lux? She worried about it all the way back to the Serpent Palace. Mercifully, they flew back, giving Kazumi's swimming muscles a rest. But in the bustle of orders and flying messengers, that wasn't a moment to talk to a queen on her own way. Anyway, back at the palace, Queen Cora told Kazumi to wait for her and took a few console dragons up for a war meeting. Kazumi sat on one of the pavilion pillars, watching dragons chart about who would kill Kestra apart from Glory or me. That is. She glanced at the cave where her friends were being held. The guards were still posted outside. She knew she should go check on the other dragoness. But what would they think when they heard about Kestra? What if her friends decided it wasn't safe here? Fight might convince the others that Kestra and Martyr could be nearby, waiting to kill them. He talked them into leaving this kingdom of the sea, and Kazumi wasn't ready for that. They were so too mad at her right now to listen to sense. And they were probably pretty grumpy about being stuck in a guarded cave all afternoon too. It's better to wait and tell them everything after they had a chance to see how wonderful it could be here. Tomorrow she asked her mother to bring them out for a feast or something, and that would cheer up at least a couple of them. Yes, that's a better plan. Avoid them until tomorrow, then tell them everything. Besides, she was so tired. Darkness had fallen as they flew back to the Summer Palace, and now the cavern was lit only by trails of glowing jellyfish in the water below. Not that it mattered to Sea Wings, who could see in the dark, but her friends probably wouldn't be so thrilled about having no light either. Another argument that could wait until tomorrow. She was relieved when the queen finally came down from the council level and led her across her lake. Queen Cora chambers at the Sunner Palace are in a vast underwater cave below one of the waterfalls, lined with waving tendrils of forest green and brilliant gold waves. Stone carvings of dolphin danced around the entrance. The walls were studded with emerald and pearls. The beds were so soft expanses of bubbly seaweed. The bed was already made up for Kazumi next to Anomi's. She collapsed onto it with a sigh, sleeping underwater on the comfortable seaweed instead of hard ledge of stone was even more wonderful than she ever imagined. She fell asleep to the sound of the waterfall splashing over her head and didn't wake up until the next morning. When she opened her eyes, she found the pale pinkish-blue head of Anomi leaning over her. Kazumi yelped and leaped back, crashing into the stone wall and bouncing off it. In a stream of bubbles, she had a wild, brief moment of thinking Anomi had just been about to kill her. And then her sister waved her talons and made a shushing gesture. Anomi pointed at Queen Cora, who was still asleep. She clasped her talon in front of her head flashed some of the stripes along her wings and tail. Sure, little sister. Tatsumi spread her front talons and shook her head. I wish I could. And Nomi flashed her stripes again, then smacked her head, remembering that Tatsumi didn't know aquatic. She frowned in frustration. Tatsumi felt equally frustrated. He couldn't sneak up to the surface to talk. Anami was trapped here by the harness to bring her to the queen, and Tsunami couldn't communicate underwater. They'd never have the chance to talk privately. She swam over to her sister and studied the harness. It was made of stretchy, gummy, clear material that seemed to cling to Anomi's scales. As if it had grown along with her, it probably has, as we thought, wondering if the poor dragonet would have to wear this until she was Tatsumi's age or even older. When Tatsumi tugged on it lightly, Nomi shook her head. She mimed trying to wriggle out of her harness and pointed to the queen again. Not possible without walking her up, Tatsumi guessed. If it is even possible at all. Anima carefully eased toward the entrance, glancing back at the queen. The cord between them unsoiled. The little dragonets lifted on the floor and swam up toward the top of the door, stretching the leash to its full length. She began to see me after her, where the waterfall met the lake, just behind the cascade and right outside the cave entrance. There was a small pocket of air. The end of her leash, and Nomi was barely able to reach it with her snout. Tatsumi popped her head out beside her. Clever, Tatsumi said, glancing around. Here they were, also hidden from view, if any seawings were out and about this early in the swimming class. I hope she doesn't wake up, Nomi said. She blinked at Tatsumi for a moment, then burst out. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. She reached out one of her front talons, and Tatsumi pressed it like they had the day before. Really? Tatsumi said, astonished. But aren't we rivals? If I'm here, doesn't that threaten your chance to be at your throne? Maybe you can make her less crazy, Anomi said in a whisper. Or maybe she will set me free now that she has you. Maybe you could talk to her. I need to get out of this harness, Tatsumi. You have no idea how awful my life has been. Tatsumi stared at her, hearing the echo of her own words. Your life has been awful, he said. You can't even imagine awful. Try being raised under a mountain with no ocean or proper sunlight, and only a river to swim in. Sorry. Raised by 3 dragons who hate you and treat you like a bully tadpole. I am treated like a tadpole, Anomi protested. Mother doesn't trust me to do anything by myself. You're only, 1 year old? Tatsumi guessed. I'm sure that will change. Well, I'm mostly sure, halfway sure. And at least she cares about you. She cares about me way too much, Anomi said. I never get to do anything except whatever she is doing. At least you have friends. I never even see any other dragonets. Well, I was sort of stuck with those 4, Tatsumi said. And they're always arguing with me or getting mad about something. She felt a pang of guilt about not visiting them the night before. They must be wondering where she'd gone. Well, maybe if they miss me for a while, they will be more pleased to see me when I do show up. They seem great, Naomi said wistfully. I always wanted brothers and sisters. Don't you have brothers? She snorted. Yes. Her mother thinks they play too rough, and she won't let them near me. My cousins are a possible suspect in her mind, except Mori, who's perfect and boring, and old and can do no wrong. And non-Noro dragonets aren't special enough to play with. And only sighed, blowing bubbles across the water at Tatsumi. I guess my friends are alright when you're not complaining, Tatsumi admitted. They complain a lot though. I tried complaining once, and then we said with a stab of venom in her voice. Mother nearly got me a gag to match the harness. At least somebody loved you, Tajimi said, and you're with your own kind. And you know your own stupid language. She loved you too, Anami offered. She paused, glancing down into the cave. Queen Cora was still fast asleep. The blue scales were rising and falling smoothly. I hope you will take Virpu, Anami blurted. 3 moons, I was sure I have to marry him. But now you're here, and you can have him, and that will be much better. No way, Tazumi said, lashing her tail. No. An image of Riptid flashed in her head, which was ridiculous because she hardly knew him either. Absolutely not. First of all, I don't have to get married. I have to swap the world and save the world and learn how to be a queen of the ceilings. Second of all, that dragon? No, thank you. I'd rather have a tail nibble on my snapping turtles. Anima giggled. He's dreadful, isn't he? Her smaller majesties, Tazumi smart, imitating his fake queen in the tiny bowl. And then we had to stick her head under the water, so her giggling wouldn't shake the harness and wake the queen. Anyway, Mother can decide who we marry, Tazumi said. Really? Anomi said thoughtfully. She gets to decide to do everything else. We're royalties, Tazumi pointed out, meaning we do whatever we want. Gosh, this is not what I have seen, Anomi said. More like we're royalties, so we only get to do historical saving queens with the proof of us doing for the good of our subjects. For the honor of the throne, for the young claw me to death already. Kazumi laughed, but her gills, but choking her scales, pricked uncomfortably. She never thought of royalty that way. The queen is really have to worry about honor and Archdragon's approval. What would happen if a seeming queen or potential queen decided to say, marry someone the rest of all the tribe disapprove of, or choose not to get married at all? It would be harder to rule subjects who didn't respect you. Tatsumi had enough trouble with her unusual form. She imagined a whole grumbling tribe full of glories and street fights. But no one would dare argue with the queen, would they? Maybe it depended on the kind of queen you were. No one argued with Scarlet in the Skywings, that was for sure. But Scarlet was murderous and insane. Just exactly the role model I want to follow. She stretched her wings out to feel the splashing of the waterfall outside their hidden spot. She could hear the quiet noises of the summer palace waking up. Dragon wings fluttered overhead. Bubbles blurred up from underwater. Caves where most of the savings were sleeping. Paws clattered on the kitchen level and the ventilation, reminding her how hungry she was. Oh well, Anami whispered, glancing down. I think she's waking up. We better go back in, Tasumi hesitated. Should she go visit her friends now? But what would her mother think if she woke up and found Tasumi gone? All right, she said, but I have one more question. What happened to Orca? If Anumi could tell her, she could put off going to ask her flight about it. Anumi pink tent wing shivers under the water. She challenged Mother for the throne. When she was only 7 years old, she whispered. Everyone says it was horrible. She nearly won, but Mother killed her in the end. She glanced down again. It's weird. Mother worships her and misses her. But lots of dragons still hate Orca for nearly killing their queen. Don't ever mention her name around Mori. Mori, Tasumi echoed. He said drippy fatros about an interesting sea sign. I was going to say odd, Tasumi laughed, but those were too. Oh, Tasumi vanished below the water. Tasumi followed her, swimming back to her bed a few moments before Queen Cora opened her eyes. The queen sat up and stroked the water with her wings and stretched. She beamed at Tazumi and Anomi, reaching to stroke their hands gently with her talons. The queen gathered a strand of pearls, the Kura branch where they hung during the night. Carefully, she wrapped them around herself again and encouraged Anomi the same way. Tatsumi hadn't taken of the one she'd been given the day before. Her mother smiled at this and pulled another long strand of furs. This a shimmering pale purple and all shaped instead of round. With expert talents, Tatsumi, Queen Kura, wound them about around Tatsumi's chest and wings. They were beautiful, but it was so strange to have something weighing her down. Tatsumi felt a buzz, almost as if she were wearing a harness. Harness of treasure. She wasn't about to complain. Ju, the talents of peace, had never given the dragons beautiful things. Finally, the queen beckoned for them to follow her from the pavilion. Tatsumi wasn't sure how she felt about being treated the same as Anomi, a one-year-old dragon. But she did like her how her mother kept patting her, as if she wanted to make sure Tatsumi was real. As they flew up to the pavilion, Tatsumi saw several guards clustered in one of the lowest levels, half of them sleeping and half of them drinking something steaming out of their handled cauldrons. She noticed that they looked well-fed, well-rested, and content, not lean and grumpy. The Queen's Scholar's guard in the Sky Palace. Proof that my mother is better than Queen Scholar, Tatsumi thought. When Queen Kura landed on the console level, a flurry of men's beats sounded over the palace. Council members swept down from the cave, or shirred up to the water below. Kura settled herself in the largest pool, which was labeled Queen. She tugged Anomi into the water with her. Though it was bitter squeeze and the little dragonets had to curl under the Queen's wings, Mother Anomi protested. Quit squishing me. She wriggled around until there was a little space for her. Small turquoise dragons darted in with flashers of food, laying them all around the pools. As council members spilled into their places, Tatsumi stood alertly to the side. She felt like her tail and wings were in the way of everything. Oh, said Queen Kura, finally noticing. Tatsumi, you can sit there. Tortoise is guarding the hatchery in the deep palace, so won't be joining us today. The queen pointed her claw at the pool down from hers, labeled Dragonet Care and Tiny Amorous. The wisdom was surely under Tatsumi's talons as she climbed into it. The pools on either side of the queen said defense and communication. Sharks splashed down in the first one, and a moment later Moray landed in another. Good morning, Your Majesty, Moray said, booing and dipping her wings. I know yesterday was a shocking day, but I hope you slept well. I worried about you all night. Thank you, dear, said the queen. Our eyes were scanning the rest of the console. Whirlpool flew up beside Moray. Its pool was labeled Magic Publishing. Tatsumi tilted her head at him. How did one become an expert in either of those things? What kind of magic did he know anything about? She glanced around, wondering if there was a pool for the king, but she couldn't see one. Queen Kura hadn't said anything about Tatsumi's father yesterday, and in all the excitement about Kestra's body, Tatsumi hadn't had a chance to ask. Maybe he was at the deep palace. Maybe she could meet him later today. She remembered some of the console from the day before. The plump dragon lagoon who'd been sent to feed the other dragonets sat in the pool like a quadrant. Perina, the one who'd gone with sharks to examine and dispose of Kestra body was in war. Tatsumi didn't know any of the other dragons' names, but from where she sat, she could see the labels treasury, justice, and hunting. She didn't really understand this console business. She wasn't sure what they did or why they were necessary. Wasn't it enough to have a queen? Couldn't Kura just decide everything herself? That's what I do, she thought. I get rid of this council and run the tribe like a proper queen. Maybe it worked for Kura, but Tatsumi didn't need her with 11 dragons following her around offering advice all the time. Her stomach rumbled, and she tried to remember when she last eaten. The platters around her were loaded with raw, ruby red fish, most of it sliced and bunned and arranged into fancy rolls with seaweed. She only ever eaten fish raw and whole, or sometimes scorched when her friends decided to set the dessert on fire. A few cargans held sitting mountains of tiny green crabs. Their large bowls. Their large bowls contained some kind of salad of octopus tentacles and herbs that Tatsumi had never seen before. She plucked out one of the tentacles and tasted it. It was rubbery but sweet, with a tang like lemons and salt. She reached for another one and realized the whole council was staring at her. Nobody else had started eating yet. Oops. Other council had slipped toward the queen, who was staring at the bit of octopus in Tatsumi's claws. Kura shook herself and smiled. That's all right, the queen started clapping her talons together. Naturally, I forgive my long-lost daughter and the accidental impudence. As we all know, she was raised by barbarians, so she couldn't know any better. I give you all permission to eat. Tatsumi crushed a tentacle between her claws. Raised by barbarians? Perhaps it was true, but what a thing to say to Tatsumi's future subject. They think of her as a dragon who knew nothing but thieving costumes. How would she never earn this under respects with that reputation? Was Kura deprived to making Tatsumi look foolish in front of the other dragons? Tatsumi started to murder with Kura, helped herself to the largest piece of fish, and crunched through taller food of crabs. She dropped pieces of food into Nomi's open mouth as she ate. Maybe Tatsumi was seeing problems where they weren't anyway. But maybe it wouldn't hurt to be a little more careful from now on. So, this was the end of the chapter.